most importantly for a lot of Nigerians, they want to know, is it possible to dislodge President Bola Tinubu in 2027?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. I said it on in some of my media articles. I said, as Mr. President in 2015, that's President Jonathan, picked that phone, rose to the moral occasion with high moral clarity and placed that call to, late General Buhari, who became President Buhari. I lost, you won. Congratulations, incoming Mr. President. But Bola Tinubu should have that moral clarity to pick that phone call in 2027 and call whoever is on the other side. I lost and you won.
The interview. As a founding National Secretary of the Alliance for Democracy, AD, how did President Bola Tinubu come across to you?
AD was a child of a compelling historic, circumstance. The convulsive period after the annulment of the June 12 election. On the one hand, the resistance on the part of the people to ensure the restoration of democracy and the insistence by the military for a continuation of their own despotic mode of governance led to fundamental contradictions within the Nigerian polity. Ultimately, with the death of Abacha and unfortunately the death of Abiola, who won the June 12 election 1993, a transitional program for restoration of democracy was inaugurated by then head of state of Sani Abubakar. Ultimately, three parties were registered as legal entities to superintend or midwife that transition. The People Democratic Party is still in existence, the All People's Party, APP, as then was called, and then the Alliance for Democracy, AD, my own party, the most radical and ideologically solid of the three, the party with roots in civil society agitation, and the party with a mindset about how to construct or reconstruct a new Nigerian state. I became the founding National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy on the basis of my enormous contribution to the democratic struggle and fidelity to progressive politics. Essentially, those of us who were in Nigeria who suffered detention multiple times, we are there as leaders of the party. Those who came from outside the country as exile, Senator Fiku Yomi, current President Bola Tinubu, and the rest of them came back to reinforce the ranks of the party. As the National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy, I was in charge of ensuring that the party primaries across the country, the 36 FCT, were done correctly in accordance with not only the laws of the land, but of course the regulations of the party. Bola Tinubu became the candidate of AD for Lagos State, and ultimately won election and was sworn in. Being a national secretary, of course, I was part of the processes and the procedures that led to the emergence of all the candidates and then signed the document to INEC that delivered them as leaders of the party, either as governor or senator or member of the House of Reps or member of the State Assembly.
What was the relationship like since you were the national secretary when he emerged and eventually...
As the national secretary of the party, I was almost like the boss of virtually everybody apart from the national chairman. So we are at the national level, they are at the regional level or the sub-national level. We had a very good relationship, very warm, cordial relationship for the period in which I was the national secretary of the party. That didn't last for the 8 years he was a governor. That lasted about 3 years or thereabout. The initial formative period from 1998 to 2002, 2001, 2002, when I left office as the National Secretary of AD. But during the period in which we were together as party members, we had very comfortable, very warm, very cordial relationship.
One would have thought that, given your background, what you went through, experiences, because of your vocal nature and then condemning the military, going to prison several times, that you would have thrown up yourself for elected position during that time. What happened?
My understanding is that life is made up of different domains and sides. And you have to understand the side of the domain where you have the best ability or the best talent or the best experience in order for you to do extraordinarily very well. And not just very well, extraordinarily very well. I usually tell people that apart from the domain of the private sector, corporate private sector, the other 4 key domains of life in Nigeria, I traverse them with a level of accomplishment that sometimes may be peerless. I became a published scholar in my early 20s. The work I wrote in 1986, published 1993, Revolutionary Extinct South African Literary Process, became a global, phenomenon. I'm one of the best works on cultural studies and literary theory in Africa in many, over 3 decades. So by the time I was 26, I actually had a tremendous output as a scholar. And within that period, I was part of the democratic struggle. Suffered detentions to rose to become an executive member of NADECO, its highest decision-making organ, and ultimately the founding National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy. So in terms of academia, I was already accomplished in my 20s and early 30s, almost on the verge of being a professor by 1998, 99, before being caught up with a bachelor, situation on and off into detention centers. By the time I became the National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy, next to the national chairman, effectively, I was in charge of the party. His records, his documents, basically as a conscience of that, radical populist political formation called Alliance for Democracy. I was eventually a director in the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, the presidency. There I was there for 8 years or 9 years as a director, traversed the world and trained across the globe. And of course, as you know it, I became a consultant to some international organizations, and today an independent consultant. So whether it's the domain of public service, the bureaucracy, or civil rights and pro-democracy agitation, or party leadership, I've played my role. So it's important for you to decide what role to play, and not what is forced upon you. That possibly elected position is a mix, to production of value. It could be material value. It could be a mix of production of wealth. For me, it is service. So if you serve as a teacher, it is as important as serving as a president. If you're a medical doctor, it's as important as serving as a parliamentarian. So as a national secretary, as a civil rights activist, as a consultant, and as a bureaucrat, I felt that I was as comfortable in my role to help society as if I were to be elected as a governor, as a president, as a senator.
The point he just made now, not many people appreciate it. That in whatever capacity you are serving is as comparative as serving as whether a senator, a president. Why is it that Nigerians don't see it that way? Because of lack of value or what?
They don't understand the essence of division of labor. If you don't divide labor, society cannot grow. But because you find a dysfunctional society, very, very inchoate in many directions, people believe that the fastest route to resource agglutination, to the making of money, is through public service, through politics. So politics is no longer a means to produce value, a means to serve, a means to impact positively on society, but a means to enhance their resource potential, a means to get the money as fast as possible. You find councillors who have ventured basically nothing before they went into office, building bungalows and buying cars, chairman of local government area, building fantastic factories and industries 2-3 years into office, president, governors, and so on, there with tremendous resources. For them, the money they make to the detriment of society is actually the key driver of political participation. That's what it should be. The moment you realize that there are strategists in politics, communicators in politics, people contest for office, people who help those who contest for office as advisors, they are all critical roles to play in the society. The earlier we understand that and appreciate the essence of societal renewal and growth, the better for Nigerian democracy. 25, 26 years, 3-4 years short of a generation, it's 30 years, almost like 1/3 of a century. And this democracy is still wobbly, still groping in the dark. The poverty in the land is extraordinarily haunting. Sense of deprivation and deluded level of existence. Hanging on the heads of virtually every segment of society. But there's a very tiny segment of the population that seem to have gotten everything for them. Before our very eyes, two Nigerians are emerging. The Nigeria of the very few dominant rich, very rapacious in their appetite, very hegemonic in their own accumulation and abuse of power and resources, and the millions and millions of ordinary citizens who are reeling under intense economic, financial, and societal shocks. How we got there is a combination of so many factors. In the early days of Obasanjo presidency, 1999 to 2001, 2002, he tried to lay a foundation of national recovery. First, even from the international environment, where Nigeria became a pariah state with an annulment of June 12 election and the full unleashment of absolute, the despotic regime by Abacha. It took a while for the country to come back on. And then at the local level, or domestic level, a lot of reforms that led to the tremendous, advancement and revolution in the telecom sector, even the enactment of the regimes of controlling corruption through the EFCC, SCP, and so on and so forth. So there was an attempt really, to bring in radical, reform measures, and then to balance governance in such a way as to accommodate everybody. The sense in which you have basically a government of national unity, when PDP won resoundingly in 1999, incorporated elements of my party, AD, and APP into government, created office of inter-party relations. So this helped in a way to advance liberal democratic grounding in Nigeria. Yet that didn't last long, for 2.5 years, but he was very clear. He had a vision. That vision itself was a vision of inclusion. a vision of simplicity, what they call the servant leadership. He helped to end the crisis in the Niger Delta. Very bloody, low-level urban insurgency in the Niger Delta. The country was bleeding, hemorrhaging its resources away. He stabilized that with amnesty and the post-amnesty program. And then, of course, creating the framework of multi-party democracy by strengthening the opposition parties, by ensuring those who won the election got the money given to them. So Jonathan, former President Jonathan, who succeeded him as a vice president when he died, was sworn in as an acting president, ultimately as a full president, and then won his own election 2011. So stayed that tape of transformation. And before he left office, had beaten Boko Haram down substantially and then grown the Nigerian economy to be the fastest in Africa. I'm not saying that the period of BDP 16-year rule was, at the highest level of Nigerian, realization of Nigerian sovereignty and then the happiness of the people. But then there was some signs in which there was a connection from the global economic and financial systems like NDGs and SDGs to that continental model, which was in the past, to the passenger model, which was the NEEDS document, if you remember, to the 7-point agenda of Yaradua, to the transformation agenda. Unfortunately, there's something you can call as an epistemic break, a radical rupture in terms of knowledge about what Nigerian democracy is all about and what steps to take to further ground it. When Buhari took office in 2015, 8 years of Buhari regime almost dismantled, the commanding heights of Nigeria's reform programs, and then to the degree in which governance became very incoherent, to the level in which abysmal failure occurred at various levels. The so-called war against terror slackened. That from northeast, it permeated into the northwest, and then with the ravages by the bandits and other criminal elements, the contamination of the entire northern Nigeria was almost absolute. From northeast to the north, to the north central. In the southeast, of course, the raging, crisis with IPOB and the Biafra agitation continued. In the southwest, the Yoruba Nation movement, led by one son, the Boko, became the signature tune of the land. By the time Buhari left office, the poverty level had become so enormous and haunting. The nation had been described as the poverty capital of the world. What is called multidimensional poverty. Poverty in all spheres of existence, at a level in which recovery is almost impossible to achieve, became the order of the day. When Senator Bola Tinubu ran under the platform of APC, he assured Nigeria that we sustain the tempo of the Buhari regime and further grant his vision of governance. That means grant a vision of incompetence and failure. So the past 2 years have radically demonstrated that. While Buhari tried even a lot, in a lot of ways, to bring some nationalistic ethos into the management of the physical, policies and the macroeconomic framework, Bola Tinubu tore everything down. He removed subsidy the very first day he was sworn in without any plan on what to do the day after. He floated in naira without any significant input from those who ought to know the implications of these two measures. To date, those two measure radical policy, somersault.
But there are those who argue that the issue of the subsidy has been able to checkmate the millions or trillions of naira that the country was losing.
But the essence is for you to ask yourself, you remove the subsidy, you put more money into the hands of both the national government and the subnational government, but the poverty is accelerating. Hunger is accelerating. Price of foodstuffs and other consumables are accelerating. Transportation beyond the reach of many people. The money even have a salary increment to 70,000 is meaningless. Any person who lives in Massacre or Maraba, any of the outlying places in Abuja, for example, and works in the central area, will require close to 100,000 a month for transportation alone. Anything, because there's no public commuting system. So what they have now is their Uber and the Bolt and so on, which takes more of 4,000 or 5,000 per trip. Sometimes 3, 4, 5 trips in a day. The economy is in such a way that there's more money in the hands of the government, but a reckless expenditure, model, lack of, value added to the life of people, and again, as I said, spiraling inflationary pressure on prices of. I have comorbidities like people of our age, whether it is high blood pressure, whether it is high sugar, and so on. So I know what goes on in the market. For the past 2 months, I can't even find prostrate, defense drugs that I'm used to. So that the price will move from 14,000 to 35,000 and so on across board in almost all the areas you can imagine. So this sense of national collapse, not the total collapse, but the incremental decay of the nation state under the watch of the last president Buhari and the current president is such that you ask yourself, liberal democracy had its own moments of failure across the 26 years, but now it is actually at an acute level, of lack of performance. So we believe that going forward, what the country needs is a reset. It is set back into capturing those early moments of liberal democracy management of the system. What you have now is actually a hybrid regime, a regime that's almost authoritarian, competitive in nature. You don't know whether it's a civil government, you don't know whether it is a dictatorial government. You find that the 4 key domains now, under the watch of the current regime, the key domains of existence, civil society is completely repressed. Look at the Unity Fountain in Abuja, where the brain party gears, was incarnated. That even led to the incident of Jonathan. The place had been gated, shut down by the DSS. He can't even protest. Why the former president allowed multiple protests, either with the fuel subsidy, the regime protest, or the bring back the gears protest, and so on there, with some sort of understanding that in the democracy, people must have their voices. This government, whether it is the Buhari regime of SARS or the last year, 2024, protests against hunger and bad governance, completely repressed. You find that even young people underage have been arrested and dumped in cells for weeks, if not for the outcry that occurred some time ago. Look at the media, harassed from pillar to post. And then you find the police, demanding for bank statements of a major media owner, like this SYMFONI television, because he published certain things that the government is not happy with. They now bend down and misapply the law in order to cage the people who should actually be those who are watching as the guardrails of democratic defense. They defy the political parties. Almost all the political parties are reeling with shock induced from outside by a government that wants a leisurely re-entry in 2027 and not re-competition for power among the different segments of the plural democratic society. You find Labour virtually absent. At a certain point in time, the president of NLC was being accused of terror financing, almost as a terrorist. When the website charges before you, it counts the spirit, monocultures the ability to work. So the decay of our liberal democratic practice or ethos has been steady. I agree, from 1999, but acceleration occurred in 2015, and the ascendancy of this decay and impotence of this governance model became accentuated with the Bola Tinubu emergence in 2023.
And some persons have also argued that it looks as if successive governments in Nigeria are worse than their predecessors. How do you look at these comments?
The problem with that kind of categorization is when you describe what constitutes failure. Yar'Adua was there for 2.5 years effectively, even less than 3. But the signs were there that he could have been Nigeria's best president. So I wouldn't say that Yar'Adua's presidency was worse than Obasanjo's presidency in many regards. Because first and foremost, he tolerated dissension. He was very inclusive. He showed the hands of bloody militants from the Niger Delta who were ravaging the country and destroying our economy. He restored peace there. But it was perceived to be slow. Mr. Go slow because he wanted to do a slow, steady march to our constitutional democracy and so on, and its enhancement. Take President Jonathan, for example. When he left office, he wasn't the most popular president. But now people appreciate even better than they appreciate Yar'Adua and even Obasanjo. For once, not just for the single act of conceding defeat in 2015, but for the way and manner in which was a liberal president that allowed a whole lot of things to happen under his watch, what the president not even allowed to watch. Obasanjo was a 30 president. For example, his democratic scorecard. How many governors were impeached? Maybe 3, sometimes illegally, in an absolute terms. Ladoja, who we are sentence there, was removed from office. I don't know how many people participated in that exercise. Fayose of Ekiti was removed. And then Darie of Plateau was removed. Alamesio, not only was he cuffed at the same point in time, Udi massacre and so on. And the blind spots of that government is part of the tremendous achievement of President Obasanjo. So these are things that are nuanced. But somehow or the other, and I'm not being partisan because I'm not a member of any of the political parties, not even PDP, there seems to be that radical rupture, that break from the sense of national direction, a sense of national coherence, a sense of the idea that governance is a very serious business of the day. So the presidency of the late Buhari, may he so rest in peace. There was a calamitous moment in our national history. Almost as if he sat in the villa, bemused and confused why the country were run aground by his cronies for 8 years. Or the current presidency of Bola Tinubu, that is very insufferably very sectional in nature, non-inclusive in any sense of the word, very parochial and Barakboistic, if you have to use such a term. When you talk about Barakboism, people talk about in Miloku Yoruba, hegemony, not the proper, progressive context of Yoruba politics. But a section of that environment, that progressive environment, that environment where that nurture pro-democracy credentials, and the attributes that now find that the government is struggling to explain that my presidency, our presidency, is for everybody. It's not for a section of the country. It is for a section of the country. When you talk about certain solidarity in terms of the next contest coming 2027, there's no certain solidarity. There's no certain unity. Remember the banner waved in front of the nation. Jonathan, no, don't contest. I don't contest because I want to bring certain solidarity, certain unity. There's no such thing as they set as a myth. So we need to demythologize this bogus claim of certain solidarity. To ask, what language do we speak in the villa now? What language do we speak in the DSS? What language do we speak in the police high command? What language do we speak in NMPC? The answer is clear. You don't speak Ifik, or Ijo, or Igbo, or Ibibio. We know the language we speak there. When they have Ogun State, one state having almost as many ministers. Fact check me on this after this conversation. As the entire Southeast, you find the three levels of hegemony in the system. Presidential hegemony, you find that the president and all the key people in the villa are from one stock. You look at the financial hegemony, central bank governor, minister of the economy, minister of the economy, FIRS, all the customs. It's one section. Look at the security apparatus, the military chief, the IGP, the DGDSS, etc., etc. It's not the government of everybody, it's the government of a section, and in the local government. That is a key battle facing Nigerians. How do you restore a national balance and a national order in the sense of national accommodation, consensus building among the elite and the mass of the people? This government has lost that plot in that direction. That's what I see going forward into 2027.
All right, what was their reaction with President Bola Tinubu declaring a state of emergency in Port Harcourt, suspending the governor on the grounds of breakdown of law and order?
I'm not a lawyer, but I know that I'm well educated, at least sufficiently educated to comment on issues of our collective concern or concern to the nation. It's a matter I thought ought to have been litigated robustly in the court of law, and the legal apparatus we have to do this sort of adjudication, the Supreme Court. The governors of the PDP extraction went to court, and then we now have the 6 months gradually coming to an end. But then the Supreme Court weigh in with its own evocative statement and final conclusive testimony on whether this stuff that the president did is legal or not. But from our relative experience as a young democracy, I believe that the president of the country has absolutely no powers whatsoever for a day to remove a sitting governor, even when he declares state of emergency. It is going to have that emergency declared and the governor in power and the state assembly in power. What it can do is to limit the ability of that apparatus to engage with matters of security and enhance the operative nature of the security agencies there to equally support the system the way Jonathan did with the number of local government areas in about 3 states in 2013 or 2014 or thereabout. Secondly, when you have a local government, when you have a sole administrator, however described and formed, and even before then, National Assembly, in the Senate particularly, they didn't even offer a vote. He had a voice vote, which he cannot break down in mathematical arithmetic sense of a total majority. But it was allowed to pass. Your duty there is physical, FISCAL, in nature. Manage the resources of the state within a limited period of time. That means the money that comes in, for the budget, how to pay salaries, how to sustain the tempo of construction work and projects going on by the governor suspended, and then how do you maintain governance in terms of running costs? What did they do? They dismantled the democratic infrastructure, not just the assembly and the governor's office. Commissioners, chief of staff, permanent secretaries, commission heads, agency heads, we knew was brought in. They culminated with a sham, illegal, insufferably unconstitutional exercise called an election, superintended by a sole administrator without a mandate to do so. So my worry is that soon, from the noise we're hearing everywhere, the state of emergency will be over, the governor may come back with the assembly, and then business as usual. I hope that one day, a future occurrence, we now compare people with activist sense of mind, to take this matter to court, to the Supreme Court particularly, and adjudicate it. By and large, this is a very massive blight on our democratic journey. And a nightmare we do not want to relive anymore, not only under this presidency, but under any future president.
Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State has been leading the charge to revive the PDP. What's the assessment of the party and the call for P2B and former President Jonathan to contest the 2027 presidential election?
On different media platforms in the past 1 year or thereabout, I've been consistent with my opinion maybe reinforced by data available to me that PDP will recover and PDP will bounce back. Maybe not in the big, formidable hegemonic, form it was in 98, 99, but in a reasonable shape to fight the 2027 political battle, the contest for the presidency, with enormous tools at its disposal, powerful strategic tools at its disposal. And leading the charge, I said from the beginning, will be the governor of Bauchi State, Senator Bala Mohammed, who happens to be the chairman of the governor's group. Because parties are composed of institutional entities, interlocking, interdependent entities. The governor's forum seems to be the most important and most powerful by virtue of being the legislative heads at the subnational level. The BOT is very important, but as a moral, the conscience of the party. The NWC of the PDP was racked by factional infighting for 2 years, so it was a little bit weak. So with the National Assembly caucus, that left the governor's forum as the preeminent center of gravity of the party's search for recovery. And Senator Bala Mohammed led the charge with a sense of devotion, a sense of equanimity of character and soul, and a sense of competence and patience and perseverance from me previously on March and our contemporary political experience in the past couple of years. Because it was a very dire situation the party was in. Lost the 23 election, governors, they walked away even during that period and supported the other candidate who eventually won in the person of APC, Bola Tinubu. Now, inheriting such a party that was almost like a carcass, a shell of his self, was difficult to manage, but he did it very well. He had fought with his fellow governors, he mobilized resources, both human and logistic. And today, the party has had a series of NEC meetings, had brought the national secretary position back into focus, and ultimately slated November 2025 to be the period of his elective national convention. Nobody ever thought in the past 1 year that PDP will get to that level in which a convention of the party will be held with almost everybody in sync, minus a few individuals who want to consider specialists, traders who want to destabilize the party. The rest of the party rank, leadership, and the common run of people, they are completely committed to this. That is why the party had to take that step to zone the presidency to the south. It's a strategic, political maneuver that will position itself very well in two regards. One, as a moral force, as a moral imperative to say a president of the southern expression is already in office. He's going to spend 4 years to 2027. And you need a southerner, but not him. Somebody else who's better than him, who performed better for the country, to be there for 4 years till 2031. That's understanding. So it is not surprising that PJB, for example, is saying, if I'm going to take power on any condition, in any party whatsoever, it is going to be 4 years I will spend 1/10 to balance out the 8 years of the South in order to have a seamless re-entry of the North in 2031. Bala Mohammed appreciated that. He has the presidential ambition. He has infrastructure, nationwide infrastructure. He has a machinery already running. But he said all that will come to an end. It's screeching hot. For the good of the party, the good of the country, for the good of our democracy, I will suspend my ambition. And if rather not like PDP will suspend his. So we can have a southern person to emerge as our candidate and hopefully win the next election. Already, as you pointed out in your question, a lot of names are being tossed around. Seyi Makinde, for example, is the governor for Oyo State. He's a second-term governor. He's eminently qualified to go for the presidency, possibly to represent a better variant of the Yoruba, nation of the Southwest extraction, more than the one we have now. We have B2B, who was a candidate of the party, who was an aspirant in the party up until 2022. When they left now to embrace the Labour Party option and did very well in 2023. He may come back to the party again. I'm sure people are talking to him, leaders of the party, to come back and see what they can do with it. And of course, the former President Jonathan, a global leader now, preeminent African statesman and a Nigerian statesman, who was the last president of the party, who from all indications, party leaders are already talking to him. People are now looking at him with a sense of nostalgia, with a sense that, oh my God, if he were to come back, we have in a nation, if we come back to power, the nation will be reinfused with that sense of democratic urgency, that sense of a measured liberal democratic journey, that sense of a relaxed presidency that's accommodating to every shade of opinion, that sense of compassion and consensus building, that sense in which you'll be attacked and vilified, and you take it well in your chin. So, and again, how did he leave the economy? How did he leave our social fabric? How did he leave our security apparatus, our security architecture, our security, the geography of nation security, system? These are the things people remember and they said, oh my God, bring back, like some young people I read here and there, from the northeast to the northwest, the north central saying, BBOG, almost a take of bring back our gears and say, bring back our good luck. It's a campaign that is gaining in momentum. I don't know where it is coming from. Ultimately, the party will make a decision, and they reach out to the people who would they like to, to carry the flag of the party. And the party is always full of contradictions. Even the best run parties, ANC was full of contradictions. That's why I find Julius Malema left or was kicked out to form his own brand of APP. Former President Jacob Zuma, is left to form his own party that did very well in the last election. But that's ANC for 100 years. A disciplined party with clear ideological direction, philosophical focus, and then a long tradition of struggle through the country with Sizwe, the spare of the nation. Yet the party racked by contradictions. No more PDP. PDP is made up of several tendencies, radical tendencies, progressive tendencies, reactionary tendencies, tendencies that are insisted on the party's autonomy of space in the democratic system, and tendencies of saying absorb the party as an apparatus to the ruling establishment called the APC. These tendencies will fight themselves out, as they've been fighting for 2 years. But as I said, the progressive autonomous tendencies have been winning. They want thus far to the convention. And if they deliver the convention, there'll be muted voices on the fringes, making some, some talks. But ultimately, the party will march on in the direction in which it will give the president and APC a fight for their life.
The APC had consistently denied the fact that they are not working towards a one-party state. But if we look at what is happening, for instance, the ADC wanted to inaugurate their party in Kaduna State. They were chased away by armed thugs. And then you see the pressure on the PDP trying to weaken it. Labour Party is as if they pressed the self-destruct button after 2023. What's your take on this assumption, allegation? That
I've actually tackled that when I talked about the competitive authoritarianism and a hybrid regime that is neither democratic, neither a full-blown dictatorship. And I told you about the 4 domains where you find the gatherings of democratic governance fully formed. Civil society being ravaged through the cyber law and other misapplication of existing criminal code, enactments and so on. I thought about the media being harassed from pillar to post, and the journalists who are now finding it difficult to do their work. I've had the labor movement almost completely silent now because of the criminalization of his commanding corps. Then they find the political parties fighting for their life, breathing with difficulty because of the stupendous, extravagant amount of pressure the ruling parties mounting on them. But as I said, politicians are like ghosts. They float around and they coagulate every now and then. That is why PDP was able to come back together in spite of this moment of dismemberment in the past. That is why the other parties will recover ultimately. But I believe that with a recovered PDP in 2025 November convention, and possibly, if they succeed in getting the likes of Tinubu or Jonathan, Jonathan come on board, and any of them takes the ticket, I will show you back in the other opposition party, apparatuses will come around the PDP as they should to have a very dominant center, that's going to give a fight to this, government in power. But let me make another observation. Of late, he found that the presidency of Bola Tinubu and the party he's in charge of, the APC, have decided now to form a habit of taking Panadol of other people's headache. As I said, you find their screaming headline of nation. Why Jonathan will not contest to bring something about? It is not your duty to talk about Jonathan. In another party, he was at least a president of Nigeria under the PDP instruction. Suddenly, a sitting minister Kayemo has left his enormous responsibilities in the aviation sector. For me, that are basically faltered, where people can't even fly, except the super rich can fly domestically in Nigeria today. Tackle such issues. No, they will not tackle it. It's that Jonathan has the legal problem and the challenge. PDP, don't make a mistake to fail him. Are you advisor of the PDP? Focus on your government and your responsibility as a minister. Leave the party to make a mistake. I thought that the APC should keep quiet and allow the PDP to slow walk itself into disaster. And at the end of the day, they say, my God, we saw it coming, but we kept quiet. Like the president said, I'm enjoying the crisis in all the parties because it suits me. Say, Jonathan presidency, if you're going to become checkmated by the court, should say the APC. Why are the ones screaming every day? Please don't do this. P2P, if he becomes a candidate of the party, it's going to be disaster. Let the party have him and let there be disaster. So the message is for APC to win. That's where the problem, the logic of this conversation with the APC and the presidency stems from. And we don't know the calculus behind this kind of illogical reasoning, where somebody is struggling to defeat him or himself or herself, and you're working hard to save such a person from such an implosion, political implosion. If P2B, former Governor P2B, former President Jonathan, Sheyi Makinde will be a disaster for the PD. Allow them to be a disaster. The problem is that the strategic zoning to the south rattled the president, his presidency, and his party. Because the idea is to lock down the south, choke the life out of the political south, make it an impregnable fortress for the ruling party and the ruling president. So that you have to now levy political war on the north if there's anybody coming from there. But with Governor P2B or President Jonathan coming on board, the fact the south will be fragmented. The president will be limited to a south-south base or bastion. The other two zones will off his grip. And with Jonathan particularly, where there's no question about the one term or second term, they're not may likely close ranks and then throw their lot with him. Knowing that in 2031, he'll be such a liberal-minded president to permit them in consensual form to select who the successor is, rather than a guy who may hold power, not only win 2027, but determine and impose on the North who will be the president in 2031.
Most importantly, for a lot of Nigerians, they want to know, is it possible to dislodge President Bola Tinubu in 2027?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. I said it on in some of my media articles. I said, as Mr. President in 2015, that's President Jonathan, picked that phone, rose to the moral occasion with high moral clarity and placed that call to, late General Buhari, who became President Buhari. I lost, you won. Congratulations, incoming Mr. President. But Bola Tinubu should have that moral clarity to pick that phone call in 2027 and call whoever is on the other side. I lost and you won. Whether it is a former President Jonathan, whether it is P2B or even Sheyi Makinde. When he does that, my understanding too is that the logic of power as we have it in Nigeria is that this president and his team panicked. That is why we're discussing politics of 2027 succession. It's not because you and I want to do it. It is compelling. Because they were doing rallies across the north, endorsing him. They had stimulated the external pressure for people to start decamping all over the place. Even one rally in the north is they removed the name of the vice president from among those they were to endorse. So there's no room for governance anymore or policy implementation. It is now a grim existential struggle to survive to 2027. But the picture is pretty horrible for the nation in terms of economy and security. And the president will run for a second term, not on any grand promise of doing something, but on the grand promise that I have done very well in the last 4 years. Give me another opportunity, I'm going to do well in the next 4. So he will run on his own record. Why the other ones run on the record that this record is hopeless, that we have a better vision for the country. But when they look at the record of the last 8 years under Buhari and the last 2 9+ under Bola Tinubu, there's nothing to run on.
All right. What's your take on 2027 in terms of advising Nigerians as we go to the polls, knowing that a lot of persons argue that, he was outside, he won, now he's seated, has control over judiciary, INEC, police, or the armed forces, that virtually there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Former Governor Rufai, I think said a few days ago somewhere in one of the programs, the president should sit down with Jonathan and ask him how, 2 things, maybe how he made that phone call, and then secondly, how he lost with everything you've just described. Apparatus of governance, the military and his commanding institutions with the security apparatuses, economy fully under his grip, and the judiciary and possibly the INEC fully under his grip. Maybe because he didn't abuse those institutions the way this one, I don't know whether they're going to abuse it or not. We're going to see. But the key thing is that the people who hold the vote, it is what you do with the vote that counts. If you look at the enormity of the challenges facing you as a voter, as ordinary Nigerian, with what you've described, you may simply recoil in your shell and say, there's no point. No, you shouldn't adopt that defeatist attitude. It happened in Ghana. It happened in many other countries where outsiders who had power before came back again and did it. If you vote their conscience and police and their vote, what they call mandate protection, and you have agents on ground across almost all the polling units who have this result with them, who snap the result and say, this is the result, signed at our unit. The collective result from all the polling units will make a totality. This president will be defeated easily. With all the power and all the pomp and pageantry and available to them, all the key institutions they have pocketed in the state capture format. That will not help anybody, because the people will have the final say. The final take on the matter is that even when you have election and people get elected and they're sworn in, that is not the end of governance. Elections confer legality. It doesn't confer, legitimacy. Legitimacy is part of performance. What you do in governance that makes you legitimate. Also, I'm fond of saying President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, just like the last president, we are legal presidents. I mean, Buhari was a legal president. This one is a legal president. So he has legality to be in office by winning an election, whether how disputed or not, and the Supreme Court pronouncing the final outcome. But is illegitimate to the degree that the people are not feeling the part of governance. So if you are not feeling part of governance, if people are groaning, suffering, if terrorism is still ravaging the country, and organized criminality is everywhere, and the fact that foodstuffs are beyond the reach of the people and drugs are beyond the reach of those who are sick, these are the signatures of legitimacy, not legality. So elections you're talking about, we confer legality on anybody, either the president or anybody else, but legitimacy will drive from ability to now transform this legal foundation of a democratic governance into people's program that will emancipate them.
Prof, thank you very much for obliging us your precious time to be on SYMFONI today. It's a pleasure having you.
To be with you.
Thank you very much.